Thank you, Nathan. Well, it is now time for our weekly political segment, Texas Face Off. And joining me this morning is Immigration Attorney Pooja Sethi and Matt Makoviak, Chairman of the Travis County Republican Party. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
And it's Sethi. I mispronounced it. I apologize for that. So, one of the things that we wanted to talk about today, obviously new rules go into effect for asylum seekers. Essentially, migrants aren't going to be allowed to apply for asylum here in the U.S. unless they first tried to seek asylum in the country that they passed through getting to the United States, for instance, Mexico. That's one of the common ones. This was an order that the president put into place. Matt, talk to us first. Your thoughts on this. Why was this necessary?
Well, it's necessary because we simply do not have the bed space and do not have the resources to handle the population that's come in the last year. We're taking in anywhere between 100 and 150,000 apprehensions every month. Now, it went down last month after the negotiated deal the president got with Mexico. The challenge is that only 10 or 12% of the people who claim asylum ultimately receive it. And asylum is not about coming here if you want to. We simply cannot accept everyone who wants to come to America. You have to meet very specific categories. You have to be persecuted. You have to be under threat. And one of the things I think that people sometimes misunderstand about asylum is you can claim asylum in your home country at a U.S. embassy. And the way to lawfully do so is to either do that or to do so at a port of entry in the United States. To enter the country illegally and then claim asylum means that the first thing you're doing is breaking the law by entering illegally, and that's what puts you into the criminal justice system. And that's part of the problem, is it takes 9 months, 12 months for these folks to have a hearing on their asylum process. So if we could move that influx, instead of coming in here, if they could, as you say, apply while in Mexico, since they're coming from Central America through Mexico, I think that would be a very good thing. Keep in mind that this is with the approval of the Mexican government. They're willing to support this and to work with the United States to try to help minimize this massive influx that we have that we simply cannot handle. The reason these facilities, there have been such negative reports about beds and things like that, is because we simply don't have enough space.
Pooja, do you feel like this is good policy, though? Do you see an issue with this policy?
It's absolutely not good policy for multiple reasons. First of all, asylum is it's a legal right, and it's created by Congress, and the president is trying to usurp that, and it's not done correctly. Number two, it breaks all domestic as well as international law, and Mexico as well as other countries have not said that they're willing to adjudicate asylum claims overseas before coming to America. So that's actually not correct, and the Mexican president has actually come out and said, I don't agree with this. I have to look at it. They don't have the resources in Mexico to handle these things. It is a legal right to come and ask for asylum, and fine, we don't have enough bed space. I do grant that. However, there are many, many people coming, and they're not putting in detention centers correctly. The reason that the children are separated from family members is because there was a policy put in place and that said that we should separate out children from mothers. They're not supposed to be kept in detention centers for that long. The reason we don't have bed space is because they're keeping people in detention centers longer, creating a backlog at the courts, creating judges to be overrun with cases. So if they had adjudicated, people come to the border, adjudicated the asylum claims properly, and then let them out, and then they would have their fear from gang violence back in their home country adjudicated properly, then the asylum process would go as it should be.
But I guess what hearing, and it's interesting because the Texas legislature, two joint committees of the House held a hearing on this, just last week, and one of the things that we heard coming from that was there are so many people, the influx of people coming in is so high that's why they can't do it the proper way, right? That's why people are being held longer, because they can't get them through the system quickly because there are so many people. So, what would you say to that because of the influx of numbers coming in?
There's not an influx that hasn't been there in past years. It's because they're holding them for longer periods of time. If you're not adjudicating people properly and letting them out, then of course there's going to be no bed space. Of course the detention centers can be overrun. Of course people aren't going to have places to go. So it's not that the influx is high because more people are coming in. It's because they're not letting them out.
Matt, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of reasons why the situation is what it is. I think one of them is the Flores decision affects all of this because it was a court case, a court ruling that affects how long you can hold children. Look, the difference between where we are now and where we were 3 years ago is you have adults that are bringing children with them. In some cases, they're families. In some cases, they're not. In some cases, it's part of the human trafficking and drug trafficking network that the cartels are using. They're basically using these loopholes in our laws to exploit children to come into this country, knowing that if they come in and they're released after 2 weeks and they have a court date a year from now, they're going to be able to live in America for a year and maybe not even show up for their court date. It's unknown whether they would or they wouldn't. So we simply cannot, when only 12% of the people are applying for asylum and receiving asylum status, we cannot let the other 88% of them come into this country and just do whatever they want. I mean, they're not here lawfully unless they showed up at a port of entry or a U.S. embassy and applied for asylum. But again, you would not do that inside the United States. A port of entry is right on the border, and the U.S. embassy would be abroad. And so, entering illegally, then claiming asylum, then being let out while you're awaiting your court date a year later, that's not a good process.
So, I think one of the big questions, and we're running out of time, so I'll ask you guys to answer this quickly, but should we, I guess part of the question is, should we as a country be allowing people who are seeking refuge, shouldn't we be a refuge for them? Shouldn't we be allowing them to come in?
Well, and we are. I mean, we have a very generous refugee and asylum policy in America. I know that the argument is it's less generous now than it was in the Obama administration. But economic hardship is simply, look, if you don't like the asylum laws in America, then you can try to change them in Congress. But currently, economic need is not a reason that you can claim asylum. There are poor people all throughout the world, and we're very compassionate for all of them, and they can go through the legal immigration process. They can apply for visas, they can apply through the visa lottery. There's all kinds of ways they can do that.
All right, and what would you say to that? Do you think we're letting enough people in, too many people in? Should we be this refuge?
Of course we should. I mean, this is international law. This is what has been going on for years. And it's not just the fact that you don't have the economics. It's more. I mean, you're facing gang violence and torture. And the bottom line of this whole thing is whatever the executive order about asylums has come out, the new asylum executive order, it breaks international and domestic law, and it's going to get overturned very swiftly.
All right, well, we'll all be watching to see what happens. We thank you both for being here with us today. And if you missed any of this, obviously we'll have this interview uploaded onto KVUE.com after the newscast. We'll be right back.